They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I never understood that phrase until I found myself standing outside St. Matthew's Cathedral, holding a manila envelope that would destroy 2 lives in front of 300 wedding guests. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to crash the wedding of the man who had crashed my marriage. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. From the moment my world tilted off its axis and everything I thought I knew about my life became a lie. It was a Tuesday in March when I discovered the truth. Funny how the most devastating moments of your life can happen on the most ordinary days. I remember the weather was unseasonably warm for early spring, and Sarah had left for her book club meeting wearing that blue dress I'd bought her for our anniversary, the same dress she'd worn on our first date 7 years ago. I was in my home office, supposedly working on quarterly reports, but really just killing time until she got home. We'd been growing distant lately, not fighting, just existing in parallel lives under the same roof. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages went through phases like this. We were both busy with work, both stressed about finances, both getting older and settling into routines. Sarah's laptop was charging on the kitchen counter when I went to grab a beer. She'd forgotten it again, the 3rd time this month. My wife was many things, but organized wasn't one of them. I figured I'd just close whatever she'd left open and put it away properly. The screen lit up when I touched the trackpad, and I found myself staring at her Facebook Messenger. I should have closed it immediately. I should have respected her privacy. But something caught my eye. A message thread with someone named Marcus that had a red heart emoji next to his name. My stomach dropped before my brain even processed what I was seeing. The most recent message was from him, sent just 20 minutes ago. "Can't wait to see you tonight, beautiful. Same place as always?" Her response, sent while she was supposedly driving to book club. "Already here, room 237. I'm wearing the blue dress you love." The blue dress I'd bought her. The blue dress from our first date. My hands started shaking as I scrolled up through their conversation. Weeks of messages, months of messages. An entire digital affair laid bare in front of me in casual, intimate exchanges that made my chest feel like it was caving in. "Missing you already." From 2 days ago, after what I now realize was her girls' night out. "You make me feel alive again." From last week, sent while I was upstairs working late. "My husband suspects nothing." From a month ago, the words hitting me like a physical blow. I kept scrolling, diving deeper into this alternate reality where my wife of 5 years was someone I'd never met. They talked about meeting at hotels, about the rush of sneaking around, about how I was too comfortable and boring to ever figure it out. The worst part wasn't the sexual messages, though those felt like knives twisting in my gut. The worst part was how happy she sounded, how alive, how she wrote to him the way she used to write to me, back when we were falling in love and everything felt electric and new. "He's working late again," she'd written just last Thursday. "Sometimes I wonder if he'd even notice if I disappeared." I would have noticed. God, I would have noticed. But apparently I hadn't noticed the most important thing of all. I found photos, pictures of them together at restaurants I'd never been to, selfies taken in hotel rooms, intimate shots that made my vision blur with rage and heartbreak. In one photo, she was wearing the necklace I'd given her for Christmas, my grandmother's vintage pendant that had been in my family for 3 generations. My legs gave out. I literally collapsed into the kitchen chair, laptop still glowing in front of me like a portal to hell. The beer I'd been holding slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the tile floor, but I barely heard it over the sound of my world ending. How long had this been going on? The oldest messages I could find dated back 8 months. 8 months of lies, of fake book clubs and imaginary girls' nights and made-up work events. 8 months of me coming home excited to see my wife, while she was counting down the minutes until she could sneak away to see him. I kept reading because I couldn't stop, even though each message felt like swallowing glass. They had inside jokes. They made plans for future trips. He called her sunshine, and she called him baby. And they talked about how perfect everything would be once she figured out how to handle the situation at home. The situation at home. That's what I was to her now. A situation to be handled. I found the message where she told him about our couples therapy sessions. The ones I'd suggested when I noticed how distant she'd become. She'd actually laughed about it. Told him how I was trying so hard to fix something that was already dead. She'd made jokes about my attempts to reconnect with her, mocking the weekend getaways I'd planned and the thoughtful gifts I'd bought her. Everything I'd done to try to save our marriage, she'd been sharing with him as entertainment. But the message that broke me completely was from just 2 weeks ago. Marcus, I think I'm ready to leave him. I can't keep pretending anymore. I want to be with you properly, not just stealing moments. You make me remember who I am. She was planning to leave me. All those nights I'd lain awake worried about our relationship, wondering how to fix things, and she'd already made her decision. I was living in a marriage that had ended months ago without anyone bothering to tell me. I don't know how long I sat there staring at that screen, but eventually I heard the sound of her car in the driveway. Sarah was coming home from her fake book club, probably still glowing from her time with Marcus, ready to slip back into the charade of being my loving wife. I closed the laptop and somehow managed to clean up the broken glass before she walked through the door. My movements mechanical and strange, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Hey honey, she said, breezing into the kitchen with a bright smile. How was your evening? I stared at her. This woman I'd loved for 7 years. This person I'd planned to grow old with. This stranger who'd been systematically destroying my life while I worked late to pay for the credit cards she'd been using to fund her affair. Fine, I managed to say. How was book club? Oh, you know how it is. She laughed, and I realized I'd been hearing that laugh differently for months without understanding why. It wasn't the warm, genuine laugh I'd fallen in love with. It was the practiced, hollow laugh of someone covering tracks. We spent way too much time arguing about the ending. I swear, Janet has no taste in literature. Janet. I wondered if Janet was real, or if she was just another character in the elaborate fiction Sarah had created. What book are you reading this month? I asked, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. For just a second, she hesitated. Just a fraction of a moment where her practiced expression faltered. Oh, it's a romance novel. You wouldn't be interested. A romance novel. Jesus Christ. I'm going to take a shower, she said, kissing my cheek with lips that had been kissing another man an hour ago. Don't wait up if you're working late again. I watched her walk upstairs, her blue dress swishing around her legs, and felt something cold and hard settling in my chest where my heart used to be. This was my wife. The woman who'd promised to love me and honor me and forsake all others. The woman who'd cried at our wedding when she said her vows. Who'd held my hand during my father's funeral. Who'd talked about starting a family someday. All of it had been a lie. Maybe not at first, but certainly for the last 8 months. I'd been living with a ghost, a shadow of the person I'd married, while the real Sarah had been giving herself to someone else. I spent that night lying awake next to her, listening to her breathe, wondering how many times she'd fallen asleep thinking about Marcus instead of me. How many times she'd made love to me while wishing I was him. How many times she'd looked at me and felt nothing but guilt and irritation and the desire to be anywhere else. The next morning, she left for work with another kiss on my cheek and another lie about her day. Working late tonight, she said, don't hold dinner. I knew exactly where she'd be working late. I called in sick to my own job and spent the day in a strange, suspended state of shock. I kept thinking I should cry or scream or punch something, but I felt oddly empty. Like I'd used up all my emotions reading those messages and now I was just hollow. I found myself going through our photo albums, trying to pinpoint when everything had changed. When had she stopped looking at me the way she looked at Marcus in those hotel room selfies? When had her smiles become performances instead of genuine expressions of happiness? Looking back, I could see the signs I'd missed. The new lingerie that never made an appearance in our bedroom. The sudden interest in working out and eating healthier. The way she'd started keeping her phone face down and taking it with her to the bathroom. The mysterious charges on our credit card that she'd explained away as work lunches and shopping trips with friends. How could I have been so blind? How could I have trusted so completely that I never thought to question anything? But I knew the answer. I trusted her because I loved her. Because I'd made a promise to her, and I'd assumed she'd made the same promise to me and meant it the same way I did. Because I'd never in my life been capable of the kind of calculated deception she'd been living for 8 months. I'd been playing by the rules of marriage while she'd been playing an entirely different game. By the time she came home that night, flushed and happy and smelling like unfamiliar cologne, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg her to explain. I wasn't going to give her the chance to lie to my face again, or worse, to try to turn this around and make it somehow my fault. Instead, I was going to learn everything I could about Marcus. I was going to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I decided how to handle it. How was work? I asked when she walked in. Exhausting. She sighed, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing at the irony. I'm going to shower and go straight to bed. Another shower, to wash off the evidence of her real life before sliding back into bed with her husband. I'll probably work late in my office. I told her, no worry, don't wait up. I spent the next several hours becoming a digital detective. It's amazing what you can learn about someone when you know their full name and have access to social media. Marcus Chen, 34, marketing director at a tech startup downtown. Recently divorced, no kids, lived in a downtown loft that probably cost more than my annual salary. I found his Instagram, his LinkedIn, his Facebook. I learned that he was into rock climbing and craft beer and expensive restaurants. I saw photos of him at company parties and weekend trips, always looking confident and successful, and exactly like the kind of man my wife had apparently decided she wanted instead of me. He was handsome in that effortless way some men are. The kind of guy who looked good in expensive casual clothes and probably never had to worry about receding hairlines or love handles. Everything about his online presence screamed success and excitement and the kind of life that made my suburban routine look pathetic by comparison. But the more I learned about Marcus, the angrier I became. Not just at him, though the fury I felt toward this stranger who'd been sleeping with my wife was white hot and consuming. I was angry at Sarah for choosing this, for deciding that whatever we'd built together wasn't worth fighting for lying to me every single day instead of having the courage to just leave. I was angry at myself for being so trusting, so comfortable, so boring that my own wife had felt the need to find excitement in someone else's bed. But mostly I was angry at the situation itself, at the unfairness of it all. I'd been a good husband, not perfect maybe, but faithful and loving and committed. I'd worked hard to provide for us. I'd been supportive of her career. I'd tried to be the kind of partner she deserved. And my reward for all of that was to be made a fool of, to be the last one to know that my marriage was over. That night, I made another discovery that shifted something fundamental in my chest. I was scrolling through Marcus's Facebook when I found a post from 3 weeks ago. Excited to stand as best man for my college roommate. Wedding bells, best man duties, can't wait. I clicked through to the comments and found the details. His college roommate David was getting married in May, and Marcus was indeed the best man. The wedding was at St. Matthew's Cathedral, one of the most prestigious venues in the city. An idea began forming in my mind, cold and precise and perfect. I spent the rest of the week gathering information. I learned that David and his fiancée Emma had been together for 6 years, had met in grad school, and were having what the local society pages described as the wedding of the season. 300 guests, 7 bridesmaids, an orchestra, and a reception at the Ritz-Carlton. I learned that Marcus would be giving a speech at the reception, that he'd been planning David's bachelor party, and that he was incredibly excited about the whole celebration. His social media was full of posts about suit fittings and speech preparations, and how honored he was to be part of his best friend's special day. It was going to be the most important day in David's life, surrounded by everyone he loved and respected. And Marcus, the man who'd been destroying my marriage, would be at the center of it all, basking in the glow of true love and commitment and all the things he'd been helping my wife destroy. The poetry of it was too perfect to ignore. I started planning. First, I contacted a divorce attorney. Not just any divorce attorney. I researched and found the most aggressive, most successful, most expensive divorce lawyer in the city. Margaret Hoffman had a reputation for taking no prisoners and leaving no assets unturned. Her consultations were booked months in advance, but when I explained that I had documented evidence of adultery and needed to move quickly, she found time to see me that week. Margaret was exactly what I'd expected. Sharp, professional, and ruthlessly efficient. I brought printouts of every message I could find, along with photos and hotel records I'd managed to track down using our joint credit cards. She looked through everything with the dispassionate eye of someone who'd seen this story play out 1,000 times before. "This is excellent documentation," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Your wife has been remarkably careless about covering her tracks. With evidence this clear, we can pursue this aggressively. I want everything," I told her. "The house, the cars, the investments, everything. I want her to understand exactly what her choices cost her." Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a warm expression. "Given the adultery and the length of the affair, we can certainly make a compelling case for that outcome. Your wife chose to violate her marriage vows. Let's make sure she pays the full price for that decision." We spent 2 hours going over strategy. The beauty of Sarah's carelessness was that I had everything I needed to prove not just the affair, but the extent of it. The hotels charged to our joint credit cards. The restaurants where she'd taken him on my dime, the gifts she'd bought him using money from our shared accounts. She hadn't just cheated on me. She'd used our marital assets to fund her betrayal. "When do you want to serve the papers?" Margaret asked. And that's when I told her about the wedding. Margaret raised an eyebrow. "That's creative and perfectly legal as long as you don't cause a disturbance. Though I have to warn you, serving papers at a social event will likely become public knowledge very quickly." "Good," I said. "I want it to be public. I want everyone to know exactly what kind of man they're celebrating." "And your wife will be there?" "As his date. I'm sure she's already planning what dress to wear to celebrate their love story." Margaret's smile turned absolutely predatory. "I like your style. Let's make sure we make this moment count." We scheduled the papers to be drawn up and finalized the week before the wedding. I would have everything I needed to end my marriage delivered at the moment of maximum impact, in front of everyone who mattered to Marcus, while he was celebrating the kind of love and commitment he'd helped destroy. But I wasn't just planning to ruin Marcus's moment. I was planning to reclaim my dignity. I hired a private investigator to gather additional evidence and to serve the papers at the wedding. James Morrison was a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial cases, and he understood exactly what I wanted to accomplish. "You want this done professionally?" he said during our consultation. "Clean, clear, and impossible to ignore, but not disruptive enough to get you arrested." "Exactly. I want him to know that his actions have consequences, but I don't want to ruin David and Emma's wedding more than necessary." James nodded approvingly. "We'll time it perfectly, during the cocktail hour before the reception speeches. Maximum visibility, minimal disruption to the actual ceremony." I spent the following weeks in a strange state of suspended animation. I continued going to work, continued having conversations with Sarah, continued playing the role of the oblivious husband while she continued playing the role of the faithful wife. But everything had changed. I watched her differently now, with the eyes of someone who knew exactly what she was hiding. I noticed things I'd somehow missed before: the way she checked her phone constantly, the new care she took with her appearance, the subtle distance she maintained even when we were in the same room. She'd already left our marriage emotionally. She was just too cowardly to make it official. Every night she'd come home from her late work meetings or girls' nights, glowing with satisfaction, and I'd watch her lie to my face with practiced ease. Every morning she'd kiss me goodbye and tell me she loved me, and I'd wonder how long she'd been saying those words without meaning them. The worst part was how good she'd become at it. If I hadn't seen those messages, I never would have suspected. She was living a double life so seamlessly that it was almost impressive in its thoroughness. But I was learning to live a double life too. During the day, I was the devoted husband, concerned about our relationship and hopeful for our future. In the evenings, while she was out with Marcus, I was strategizing with lawyers and private investigators, planning the most spectacular end to a marriage that had probably ever been executed. 2 weeks before the wedding, Sarah started talking about a work conference she needed to attend the same weekend. Some important industry event that had come up suddenly, requiring her to travel out of state for 3 days. "It's terrible timing," she said, looking appropriately disappointed. "I know we'd planned to spend the weekend together, but this could really help my career." Another lie, delivered with the same concerned expression she'd probably practiced in the mirror. There was no work conference. There was just a wedding she wanted to attend as Marcus's date, and she needed me to believe she was somewhere else entirely. "That's okay," I told her. "I'll miss you, but I understand how important your career is." The words tasted like poison in my mouth, but I forced them out with a smile. "You're the best husband ever," she said, kissing my forehead. "I'm so lucky to have someone who supports my dreams." I wondered if she felt anything when she said things like that. Any guilt, any shame, any recognition of the cruelty of using my love for her as cover for her betrayal, or if it had become so natural to lie to me that she didn't even think about it anymore. 3 days before the wedding, Margaret called to confirm that everything was ready. "The papers are finalized," she said. "James has his instructions and the timeline. Are you sure you want to go through with this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. It's going to be messy. Your wife will be humiliated, Marcus will be publicly embarrassed, and it'll probably end up in the society pages. There's no taking this back once it's done." "Good. Let them both feel a fraction of what they put me through. And you're prepared for the aftermath? She's going to be furious when she realizes you've known about the affair all along." I thought about that, about the confrontation that would come after the papers were served, about the lies she'd tell to try to justify what she'd done, about the way she'd probably try to make this somehow my fault. She gave up the right to be angry when she decided to betray our marriage, I said. Whatever happens next, she earned it. Margaret was quiet for a moment. You know, in 30 years of practicing family law, I've seen a lot of revenge schemes. Most of them are petty and self-destructive. But this has a certain elegance to it. You're not just getting revenge. You're reclaiming your dignity. That's exactly what it was. For months, I'd been the fool, the cuckold, the oblivious husband whose wife was laughing about him with her lover. I'd been a joke, a problem to be managed, a situation to be handled. But not anymore. In 3 days, the power dynamic would shift completely. Sarah and Marcus would learn that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price, and that the boring, trusting husband they'd underestimated was capable of playing their game better than they ever imagined. The night before the wedding, Sarah packed for her fake conference trip. I watched her carefully select outfits, including a stunning red dress I'd never seen before. "That's beautiful," I said. "Is it new?" "Oh, this old thing?" She laughed, holding it up to herself in the mirror. "I've had it forever. Just never had the right occasion to wear it." Another lie. I checked our credit card statements. She'd bought that dress 2 weeks ago at an expensive boutique downtown. $300 for a dress to wear to another man's wedding, while her husband thought she was at a work conference. "Well, you'll look beautiful," I said, and I meant it. She would look beautiful. She would look radiant and happy and completely in love, right up until the moment James Morrison handed her divorce papers in front of 300 wedding guests. "I'll miss you," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "I hate being away from you." I held her close, breathing in her familiar scent, memorizing the feeling of her in my arms, because this was the last time I would ever hold my wife. Tomorrow she would become my soon-to-be ex-wife, and everything between us would be lawyers and paperwork and the bitter end of what had once been the most important relationship in my life. "I'll miss you too," I whispered into her hair, and for the first time in weeks, I wasn't lying. Because despite everything she'd done, despite the betrayal and the lies and the months of humiliation, part of me would always miss the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman who'd existed before Marcus, before the affair, before she'd decided that our life together wasn't enough for her. That woman was gone. Probably had been gone for longer than I wanted to admit. But tomorrow I would finally stop pretending she was coming back. Tomorrow I would stop being the fool and start being the man who refused to let his life be destroyed without consequences. Tomorrow, Sarah and Marcus would learn that love and commitment aren't just pretty words you say at weddings. They're promises that matter, and breaking them comes with a price that neither of them had calculated. I fell asleep that night with Sarah curled up beside me, already dreaming of her day with Marcus. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not happiness exactly, but the calm that comes with finally taking control of your own story. In less than 24 hours, the game would be over. And for the first time since I discovered the truth, I would be the one holding all the cards. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright, one of those perfect May days that seemed designed for celebrations and new beginnings. Sarah was up early, humming in the shower, and I lay in bed listening to her get ready for what she thought would be one of the best days of her life. The irony was so thick I could taste it. "I hate leaving you on such a beautiful Saturday," she called from the bathroom, and I could hear the barely contained excitement in her voice. She was trying so hard to sound disappointed about her fake conference, but she couldn't quite hide how thrilled she was about her real plans. "Don't worry about me," I called back. "I'll probably just work on the yard, maybe catch up on some reading." The picture of a boring suburban husband spending his Saturday on mundane tasks while his wife was off advancing her career. If only she knew that my actual plans involved destroying her life in the most public way possible. I made us breakfast, probably the last meal I'd ever cook for my wife, and watched her eat while mentally going over the timeline James and I had established. The ceremony was at 2 o'clock, followed by cocktails and then the reception. James would be in position by 4:30, dressed as a guest with legitimate invitations he'd acquired through his network of contacts. At exactly 5:15, during the cocktail hour when the maximum number of guests would be mingling and Marcus would be at his most visible and confident, James would approach him with the envelope that would change everything. "You're quiet this morning," Sarah observed, spreading jam on her toast with the same hands that had been all over Marcus just 2 nights ago. "Everything okay?" "Just thinking about work stuff," I said. "You know how it is." She nodded sympathetically, playing the part of the understanding wife to perfection. "Well, try to relax while I'm gone, okay? You've been working so hard lately." I had been working hard lately, just not on the projects she thought. I'd been working on gathering evidence, coordinating with lawyers, and planning the most spectacular revelation of adultery in recent memory. But she was right that I should relax. After today, the hardest part would be over. I should get going, she said, checking her phone. My flight's not until noon, but you know how airport security is these days. There was no flight. She was driving 2 hours to the city where the wedding was being held, probably meeting Marcus at some romantic bed and breakfast where they'd spend the night before attending his best friend's wedding together. I wondered if they'd practiced their story, decided how they'd explain their relationship to the other wedding guests. Maybe she was his mysterious new girlfriend, or perhaps they were keeping things low-key and just attending as friends. Either way, it didn't matter. By the end of the day, everyone at that wedding would know exactly what their relationship really was. I walked her to the car, playing the dutiful husband role one last time. She kissed me goodbye, a soft, lingering kiss that once would have made my heart race and now just made me feel hollow. I love you, she said, looking directly into my eyes with what appeared to be complete sincerity. I love you too, I replied, and for a brief moment, I almost meant it. Not love for who she was now, but love for who she used to be, and grief for who we used to be together. I watched her drive away, probably already calling Marcus to tell him she was on her way, and felt a strange sense of finality. This was it. The last time I'd see my wife as my wife, rather than as the woman who'd betrayed everything we'd built together. I spent the morning in a state of controlled nervous energy. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, not because it needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands. I organized my desk, paid bills, and handled all the mundane tasks of normal life, while my mind counted down the hours until everything would change. At noon, I got a text from Sarah. Flight delayed, but should still make it to the hotel in time for dinner with colleagues. Missing you already. I deleted the message without responding. Let her wonder why her devoted husband wasn't immediately texting back with concern and support. She'd figure it out soon enough. James called at 1 o'clock to confirm final details. I'm in position, he said. Drove by the cathedral this morning. It's going to be quite a production. Lots of flowers, lots of guests, lots of photographers. Perfect setting for maximum impact. Any sign of them? Not yet, but I expect they'll arrive separately to avoid suspicion. Don't worry, I'll find them both when the time comes. Remember, I want this done professionally. I want it clear and unmistakable, but I don't want to completely destroy David and Emma's day. Understood? Clean, quick, and devastating. I've been doing this for 15 years. I know how to make a point without causing a riot. At 2 o'clock, I was sitting in my living room, staring at the wall and imagining the ceremony beginning. David and Emma exchanging vows, promising to love and honor each other, to forsake all others, to be faithful until death parted them. The same vows Sarah and I had made 5 years ago. The same promises she'd been systematically destroying for the past 8 months. I wondered if she felt anything during the ceremony. Any guilt, any recognition of the sacred promises she'd made and broken. Or if she was just thinking about how beautiful everything was, how romantic it all felt, how perfect this day was for her and Marcus to be together in public. My phone buzzed at 2:30 with another text from Sarah. Conference sessions are really interesting. Learning so much. Hope you're having a good day. I imagined her typing that message while sitting in a pew, watching Marcus in his best man tuxedo, probably thinking how handsome he looked and how proud she was to be there with him. I didn't respond to that text either. At 3 o'clock, I did something I hadn't done in months. I poured myself a scotch. Not because I needed liquid courage, but because this felt like a moment that deserved marking. A toast to the end of my marriage, to the end of being played for a fool, and to the beginning of whatever came next. To truth, I said aloud to my empty house and drained the glass. James texted at 4:45, in position. Located both targets. She looks radiant, red dress, just like you said. He's working the room like the proud best man. Timing will be perfect. I tried to imagine the scene. The cathedral's fellowship hall filled with happy, well-dressed people celebrating love and commitment. Marcus in his element, charming and confident, probably telling stories about David and making everyone laugh. Sarah beside him, beautiful and glowing, playing the role of his mysterious date while secretly reveling in being part of such an elegant, romantic celebration. Neither of them having any idea that their world was about to implode. 5 o'clock came and went. 5:10, 5:12. My phone was silent, and I found myself holding my breath, waiting for the text that would tell me it was done. At 5:17, my phone finally buzzed. Package delivered. Both targets received copies. Reaction was immediate. Sending photos now. A minute later, my phone chimed with a series of photos from James. The first showed Marcus's face in the moment of recognition, his confident smile dissolving into shock and confusion as he opened the envelope. The second captured Sarah's expression as she read over his shoulder, her face going from curious to horrified in real time. The third was a wider shot, showing other guests beginning to notice that something was wrong, heads turning as word began to spread through the crowd. But it was the fourth photo that really satisfied me. It showed Marcus crumpled into a chair, the divorce papers scattered on the floor around him, while Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the elegant reception hall with her hand over her mouth, looking like someone had just told her that everyone she loved was dead. My phone rang immediately, Sarah's number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. You bastard, she screamed, her voice so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. And I, Tubman, how could you do this? How could you embarrass me like this? Embarrass you? I said calmly. That's interesting. I would have thought the embarrassing part was having an affair for 8 months and lying to my face every single day. This isn't. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I interrupted. I understand that you've been fucking Marcus Chen for 8 months while pretending to love me. I understand that you've been using our joint credit cards to pay for hotel rooms and romantic dinners with your boyfriend. I understand that you've been making me look like a fool while planning to leave me. The only thing I don't understand is why you thought you could do all of that without consequences. I was going to tell you when. Before or after you moved in with him? Before or after you figured out how to take half of everything I've worked for? Before or after you finished destroying what was left of my dignity? She was crying now. Those dramatic sobs she used whenever she wanted to deflect from her own bad behavior. It had worked on me for years, but not anymore. Please, she gasped. Can we just talk about this? Can you please just come get me? I'll explain everything, I promise. This is all just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I laughed and the sound surprised me with its coldness. Sarah, I've read every message you send him. I've seen every photo. I know about every hotel, every restaurant, every lie you told me to cover your tracks. There's no misunderstanding here. There's just you finally facing the consequences of your choices. But you served me divorce papers at a wedding, she screamed, in front of 300 people, in front of Marcus's friends and family. How am I supposed to show my face anywhere after this? That's not my problem anymore. You're supposed to love me. You're supposed to forgive me. We're married. No, I said quietly. We were married. Past tense. You ended our marriage 8 months ago when you decided Marcus was more important than our vows. I just made it official today. I could hear chaos in the background. Voices, someone crying, what sounded like Marcus trying to explain himself to someone. Probably David, whose perfect wedding day had just been derailed by his best man's sordid affair with a married woman. Marcus is devastated, Sarah said as if that should matter to me. His friendship with David might be ruined. His reputation is destroyed. How could you be so cruel? Let me get this straight, I said. You're upset that Marcus is facing consequences for helping you destroy our marriage? You're worried about his reputation? What about my reputation, Sarah? What about the 8 months I spent looking like an idiot while my wife was laughing about me with her boyfriend? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I read the messages, remember? I saw you making jokes about our therapy sessions, mocking the gifts I bought you, complaining about how boring I am. You turned our marriage into entertainment for your affair partner. And now you're upset that he has to face some embarrassment? That's rich. The line went quiet except for her crying. Finally, she managed to speak again. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to get home? Call Marcus. I'm sure he'll figure something out. I paused. Actually, on second thought, maybe not. James told me he left the reception pretty quickly after the papers were served. Something about needing to do damage control with David's family. Apparently, adultery isn't a great look when you're the best man at someone's wedding. I can't believe you're being so cold about this. I can't believe you're surprised. What did you think would happen when I found out? Did you think I'd just quietly accept that my wife preferred someone else? Did you think I'd politely step aside while you figured out how to take half of everything I've worked for? I never wanted to hurt you. Then you shouldn't have had an affair. You shouldn't have lied to me every day for 8 months. You shouldn't have made me into a joke while planning to abandon our marriage. But you did all of those things, so here we are. I could hear someone else talking to her in the background, probably trying to get her to hang up and deal with the immediate crisis of being stranded at a wedding where everyone now knew she was an adulteress. "I need to go," she said finally. "But this isn't over. We need to talk when I get home." "Actually, we don't," I said. "From now on, all communication goes through our lawyers. Margaret Hoffman is representing me. I'm sure she'll be happy to coordinate with whoever you hire. Other than that, we have nothing to discuss. But our house, my house now, I'd suggest you make other arrangements." "You can't just throw me out." "I'm not throwing you out. You chose to leave our marriage. I'm just making the legal reality match the emotional reality. You've been checked out of this relationship for months. Now it's official." I hung up before she could respond. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I turned it off. Whatever Sarah had to say could wait. I'd given her 5 years of my life, 8 months of unwitting humiliation, and a lifetime of trust and commitment. I didn't owe her another second of my time. I poured myself another scotch and sat down to wait. Sarah would eventually make it home, whether Marcus helped her or she had to figure it out herself. When she did, we'd have the final confrontation that had been building for months. But for the first time since I discovered her affair, I wasn't dreading it. I was ready. The house felt different now. Quieter but not empty. Peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. All the secrets were finally out in the open. All the lies had been exposed. All the pretending was over. I thought about David and Emma, whose perfect wedding had been overshadowed by the revelation of their best man's affair. I felt genuinely sorry about that. They didn't deserve to have their special day tainted by Marcus's choices. But I couldn't bring myself to regret the timing. Marcus had chosen to attend that wedding as Sarah's date while she was still married to me. He'd chosen to celebrate love and commitment while actively destroying someone else's marriage. If that hypocrisy had finally caught up with him at an inconvenient moment, well, that was the price of living a double life. Around 7 o'clock, I heard a car in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw a taxi dropping Sarah off. She was still wearing the red dress, but it was wrinkled now, and her makeup was smeared from crying. She stood in the driveway for a long moment, staring at the house like she wasn't sure she had the right to enter it anymore. She was right to hesitate. This wasn't her home anymore. It was the place where she'd spent months lying to someone who loved her, where she'd planned her betrayals and covered her tracks. How do you walk back into a space where you've caused that much damage? I watched her finally make her way to the front door, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. The rage that had sustained me through weeks of planning had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder and more final. I felt like I was watching a stranger approach my house, someone I'd once known but had nothing in common with anymore. She used her key to let herself in, probably expecting me to meet her at the door for the big confrontation scene. But I just stayed in my chair in the living room, finishing my scotch and waiting for her to find me. "David," she called out, her voice shaky and uncertain. "David, where are you?" "In here," I replied calmly. She appeared in the doorway of the living room, and I was struck by how small she looked. This woman who had dominated my thoughts and emotions for months, who had seemed so powerful in her ability to deceive and manipulate, looked like nothing more than a scared, guilty person who'd finally been caught. "We need to talk," she said. "No, we don't. I told you, everything goes through lawyers now. Please." She sat down on the couch across from me, the same couch where we'd watched movies together, where we'd planned our future, where she'd probably been texting Marcus while pretending to pay attention to our conversations. "Please, just let me explain." "There's nothing to explain. You had an affair. You lied about it. You got caught. End of story. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple." She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her trying to figure out which angle to take. The remorseful wife? The victim of circumstances? The woman who'd made a mistake but still deserved forgiveness? "I never meant for this to happen," she said finally. "Marcus and it just sort of developed over time. I didn't plan it. You didn't plan it, but you chose it. Every day for 8 months, you chose it. I was confused. I was unhappy. I felt like we were growing apart, and Marcus made me feel alive again. So instead of talking to me about feeling unhappy, you decided to have an affair. I tried to talk to you. I suggested therapy. You suggested therapy while you were already sleeping with someone else. You used our therapy sessions as material to share with your boyfriend. I read those messages, remember?" Her face flushed red. She'd forgotten about that. Forgotten that I'd seen her making jokes about my attempts to save our marriage. That was wrong of me. I know that now. You know it now because you got caught. If I hadn't found those messages, you'd still be doing it. No, she said quickly. I was going to end it. I was going to tell you everything and work on our marriage. Bullshit. The word came out harder than I'd intended. You were planning to leave me. I read that message too. I think I'm ready to leave him. I can't keep pretending anymore. Ring any bells? She looked down at her hands, caught in another lie. You weren't going to end it with Marcus. You weren't going to work on our marriage. You were going to string me along until you figured out how to leave without losing too much in the divorce. The only thing you're sorry about is that I found out before you were ready. That's not true. Then why are you here? I asked. If you love Marcus so much, if he makes you feel so alive, why aren't you with him right now? Why aren't you comforting him after his terrible, embarrassing day? She was quiet for a long time. Finally, she whispered, he said he needed space to think, and there it was. The truth she couldn't bring herself to say directly. Marcus had abandoned her the moment things got complicated. The man she'd sacrificed her marriage for had run away the second he faced real consequences for their affair. I see, I said. So he was fine with sneaking around and lying as long as it was easy and exciting. But the moment your affair became public knowledge, the moment it cost him something real, suddenly he needs space to think. He's just upset about David. Their friendship goes back to college. Stop, I said. Just stop defending him. He's a coward who was happy to help you destroy our marriage as long as he didn't have to pay any price for it. And you're defending him to the husband he helped betray. Do you see how insane that is? She started crying again, but this time it felt different. Not the manipulative tears she'd used to try to deflect blame, but genuine grief and shock at finding herself completely alone. I don't know what to do, she sobbed. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to fix this. You can't fix this, I said, and my voice was gentle now, not cruel. Sarah, you can't fix this. You made choices that changed everything permanently. There's no going back. But I love you. No, you don't. You might have loved me once, but not anymore. If you loved me, you wouldn't have been able to lie to me every day for 8 months. If you loved me, you wouldn't have made me into a joke to share with your boyfriend. If you loved me, you would have ended our marriage honestly instead of trying to have both lives. I made mistakes. You made choices. And now you have to live with the consequences of those choices, just like I have to live with the consequences of trusting you. We sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, the sun was setting on what should have been one of the happiest days of David and Emma's lives, but which had instead become the day everything fell apart for Sarah and Marcus. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you find somewhere else to stay tonight. Tomorrow you hire a lawyer. We divide our assets according to what the law allows, which probably won't be very favorable to you considering the documented adultery. And then we move on with our separate lives. But the house will probably be mine, since I'm the only one who's been paying the mortgage while you were spending our money on your affair. My job is yours to figure out, though you might want to update your emergency contact information. She looked around the living room like she was seeing it for the first time, or maybe like she was trying to memorize it. I really did love you, she said quietly. I know you don't believe me, but I did. Maybe you did in your way. But love isn't just a feeling, Sarah. Love is a choice you make every day. And every day for 8 months, you chose someone else. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I'm going upstairs, I said, standing up. I'll be in my office. You can pack whatever you need for tonight, but I'd like you gone within an hour. Where am I supposed to go? Call a friend. Get a hotel. Figure it out. You're a smart, capable woman. You managed to coordinate a secret affair for 8 months. I'm sure you can manage to find a place to sleep. I started toward the stairs, then stopped and turned back. Sarah? She looked up at me hopefully, probably thinking I was about to offer some gesture of reconciliation or forgiveness. The credit cards are canceled. You'll need to pay your own way from now on. The hope died in her eyes, replaced by the final understanding that this was really over. That the safety net of our marriage, the financial security and emotional support and shared life she'd taken for granted while pursuing her affair, was gone forever. I went upstairs and closed my office door, listening as she moved through the house below me, packing clothes and toiletries and the pieces of her life she could carry. I heard her on the phone, probably calling friends to ask for help, having to explain why she suddenly needed a place to stay. I wondered what she'd tell them. Some version of the truth that made her look less culpable? A story about how her husband had overreacted to a minor indiscretion? Or would she be honest about the extent of her betrayal? About 45 minutes later, I heard the front door close and a car start in the driveway. I looked out the window and saw her driving away in her car, probably to stay with her sister across town. We'd have to figure out who got which car eventually, but for tonight, I just wanted her gone. The house felt enormous and quiet without her. Not empty exactly, but different. Like a space that was finally free to be what it actually was, rather than what I'd been pretending it was. I called Margaret Hoffman's emergency line to update her on the day's events. Papers served successfully, I reported. Target acquired and neutralized. Margaret laughed. I take it the reaction was everything you'd hoped for? Better. The affair partner abandoned her immediately. She's currently homeless and penniless. And everyone at that wedding now knows exactly what kind of people they are. Beautiful. And how are you feeling? I considered the question. How was I feeling? Not happy exactly. The end of a marriage, even a marriage that had been destroyed by betrayal, wasn't something to celebrate. But not sad either. Not anymore. Free, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel free. Good. Good. That's exactly how you should feel. You've taken control of your own life again. You've refused to be a victim. You should be proud of yourself. What's next? Next, she scrambles to find legal representation, and we proceed with the divorce. Given the evidence we have and the public nature of the affair, this should be relatively straightforward. She'll probably try to negotiate for a more favorable settlement, but adultery is adultery. The law is on your side. And Marcus? What about him? Will there be any legal consequences for him? Alienation of affection laws exist in some states, but they're rarely enforced and difficult to prove. He'll face social consequences, professional embarrassment, and the loss of important relationships, but probably nothing legal. That's enough, I said. I don't need him in jail. I just needed him to understand that actions have consequences. After I hung up with Margaret, I ordered pizza and opened a bottle of wine. Not to celebrate exactly, but to mark the moment. The end of one life and the beginning of another. I thought about Sarah, wherever she was staying, probably still crying and trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. I thought about Marcus, probably drinking alone in his expensive loft, realizing that his best friend might never forgive him and his reputation was permanently damaged. I thought about David and Emma, whose perfect wedding would now always be remembered as the day their best man was exposed as an adulterer. But mostly I thought about myself, about the man I'd been 8 months ago, trusting, comfortable, completely unaware that his life was built on lies, and about the man I was now, clear-eyed, self-sufficient, and finally free from the exhausting work of loving someone who had stopped loving him back. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the future I'd imagined when I'd promised to love Sarah until death parted us. But it was honest, it was real, and it was mine. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Marcus. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. Sarah means everything to me, and I'm sorry for any pain this has caused you. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. If she meant everything to you, you wouldn't have abandoned her the moment things got difficult. You're both cowards who deserved each other, but apparently not even that worked out. Don't contact me again. I blocked the number and deleted the conversation. Around midnight, Sarah called from her sister's phone. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. David, I know you're angry, but please, can we at least try counseling? Can we try to work this out? I made mistakes, but we had 5 good years together. That has to count for something. Please, just think about it. I love you. I deleted the message without calling back. Over the next few days, Sarah tried various approaches to reconciliation. She sent flowers to my office with a note apologizing for everything and begging for a chance to explain. She had her sister call to tell me how devastated she was and how much she regretted her lapse in judgment. She even showed up at the house one evening, but I didn't answer the door. The local gossip network was having a field day with the story. Within a week, half the city knew about the divorce papers being served at the wedding. The story got embellished with each telling. In some versions, I'd confronted Marcus physically. In others, I'd hired skywriters to announce the affair over the cathedral. The truth was dramatic enough, but people seemed to prefer the more theatrical versions. I received a formal apology from David, who had apparently pieced together the timeline and realized that Marcus had brought his affair partner to the wedding as his date. I had no idea, he wrote. If I'd known what Marcus was doing to your marriage, he never would have been in my wedding party. I'm sorry that your situation became entangled with what should have been Emma's and my special day. I wrote back thanking him for his understanding and wishing him and Emma happiness in their marriage. They seemed like good people who'd gotten caught up in someone else's drama through no fault of their own. Margaret called 2 weeks after the wedding to report that Sarah had hired representation and wanted to discuss settlement terms. She's asking for spousal support and half the marital assets, Margaret said. Her lawyer's trying to argue that the adultery shouldn't affect the financial settlement. What are our chances? Excellent. The documentation you provided is ironclad, and serving the papers publicly actually works in our favor. It shows that she was flaunting the affair in social settings. Add to that the fact that she was using marital funds to finance the relationship, and we have a very strong case for an unequal division of assets. What about the house? The house will be yours. She might get a small settlement, but nothing close to what she'd have received in a no-fault divorce. 3 weeks after the wedding, I ran into Marcus at a coffee shop downtown. He looked terrible, haggard and thin, like he hadn't been sleeping or eating properly. When he saw me, he froze like a deer in headlights. "David," he said carefully, "I wasn't expecting to see you here. It's a free country." I replied, ordering my usual coffee and ignoring him. "Look, I know you hate me, but I really think we should talk." I turned to face him fully for the first time since I'd learned his name. What could we possibly have to talk about? About Sarah. About what happened between us. About how to move forward. There is no us, Marcus. There never was. You were just the other man in my wife's affair. And as for moving forward, that's simple. You stay away from me, and I'll stay away from you. She's not doing well, he said quietly. She's staying with her sister, but she's really struggling. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to have her whole life destroyed. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. That's rich coming from you. Where was this concern for her well-being when you were helping her lie to me every day? Where was this protective instinct when you abandoned her at the wedding reception? I panicked, he admitted. I handled that badly. But I do care about her. If you cared about her, you would have encouraged her to end her marriage honestly before starting something with you. If you cared about her, you wouldn't have made her into a social pariah by bringing her to your best friend's wedding as your date while she was still married. If you cared about her, you wouldn't have run away the moment your affair had real consequences. He looked down at his hands. You're right. I fucked up. We both did. Yes, you did. And now you're both paying the price for it. That's how consequences work. Is there anything I can do? Any way to make this right? I studied his face, looking for any sign of genuine remorse or understanding. All I saw was a man who was sorry he'd gotten caught. Sorry his life had gotten complicated. Sorry that his actions had turned out to have a cost he hadn't calculated. You want to make it right? I said finally. Leave her alone. Let her figure out how to rebuild her life without dragging you into it. And maybe think about the kind of man you want to be going forward. Someone who pursues married women, or someone who has enough integrity to walk away when things get complicated. I left him standing there and walked out of the coffee shop. It was the last time I ever spoke to Marcus Chen. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Sarah got a minimal settlement, enough to help her get back on her feet, but nowhere near the comfortable lifestyle she'd been accustomed to. The house, the investments, and most of our shared assets became mine. She kept her car and her personal belongings, and that was it. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to another city, ostensibly for a fresh start, but probably because staying local had become too uncomfortable. The story of her affair and the wedding day divorce papers had become local legend, and she couldn't go anywhere without people knowing exactly who she was and what she'd done. Marcus, I learned, had been quietly asked to leave his job after the affair became public knowledge. Apparently, his company had a morality clause in their employment contracts, and having an affair with a married woman was considered bad for their brand. He'd also lost several friendships, including his relationship with David, who had reportedly told him that he couldn't maintain a friendship with someone who had so little respect for marriage and commitment. On the 1-year anniversary of the wedding, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Sarah, postmarked from a city 3 states away. David, it began. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, and I understand if you throw this letter away without reading it. But I wanted you to know that I think about what I did every day, and I'm truly sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness, because I know I don't deserve it. I'm not writing to try to justify my actions, because there is no justification for what I did to you and to our marriage. I'm writing because I've spent the last year in therapy trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could lie to someone I loved for 8 months. And I wanted you to know that I finally understand the magnitude of what I destroyed. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. You deserved honesty and loyalty and respect. And instead I gave you lies and betrayal and cruelty. I destroyed something beautiful because I was selfish and cowardly and too immature to handle my own unhappiness in a constructive way. I don't expect you to care, but I want you to know that Marcus and I are not together. We tried to make it work after the divorce, but our relationship was built on deception and excitement, and it couldn't survive in the real world where actions have consequences. I'm alone now, and I think that's what I deserve. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. I hope someday you'll be able to trust someone enough to love them the way you love me, because whoever that person is, they'll be incredibly lucky. I'm sorry, David, for everything. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed you to know. Sarah, I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. Not because I was saving it for sentimental reasons, but because it felt like the final piece of the story. The last word on a chapter of my life that had finally, completely ended. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt anymore. I was just done. Sarah had become someone from my past, someone I used to know. Someone who had taught me important lessons about trust and self-respect and the difference between love and habit. 6 months later, I met someone new. Jennifer was a teacher, divorced with no kids, kind and funny and refreshingly honest about everything in her life. She knew my story. Everyone in town knew my story by then, but she didn't treat me like a victim or a cautionary tale. She treated me like a man who'd survived something difficult and come out stronger on the other side. You know what I like about you? She said one evening, as we were having dinner at a restaurant where Sarah and I had never eaten, where I had no memories to complicate the moment. Hey, what's that? You're not bitter. I've dated men who went through messy divorces, and they were all angry and suspicious and convinced that all women were liars. But you're not like that. I was angry for a while, I admitted. But anger is exhausting. And staying angry would have meant letting Sarah continue to control my life, even after she was gone. I didn't want to give her that power. So what did you do instead? I thought about that question. What had I done instead of staying angry? I learned to trust myself again, I said finally. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I learned that I deserve to be with someone who chooses me every day, not just when it's convenient or easy. Jennifer smiled. I choose you every day. I choose you too. And I meant it. Not because Jennifer was some kind of rebound or replacement for what I'd lost, but because she was something entirely new. Something honest and real and built on a foundation of truth instead of lies. Sometimes I think about Sarah, wherever she is now, hopefully learning to be a better person than she was during our marriage. Sometimes I think about Marcus, hopefully learning that integrity matters more than excitement. But mostly I think about the future, about the life I'm building with someone who understands that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that comes and goes. The wedding where I served divorce papers has become something of a local legend. People still talk about it at parties, usually with a mixture of shock and admiration. Some think what I did was cruel, others think it was brilliant. I don't really care what people think about it anymore. What I know is this: I refuse to be a victim. I refuse to let my life be destroyed quietly while other people made jokes about how oblivious I was. I took control of my own story and made sure that the people who had betrayed me faced real consequences for their actions. Was it revenge? Absolutely. Was it worth it? Without question. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your dignity is to refuse to suffer in silence. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to make sure that the people who hurt you understand exactly what they've done and exactly what it cost them. I served those divorce papers at that wedding not just to hurt Sarah and Marcus, but to save myself. To prove to myself that I wasn't the kind of man who would quietly accept betrayal. To demonstrate that love and commitment and marriage vows actually mean something, and that violating them comes with a price. And in the end, that's exactly what happened. They paid the price, and I got my life back. Some might call that revenge. I call it justice. Either way, it was the best decision I've ever made.